So welcome everybody, thanks for joining us on this special day. As you can see, we are live from Buckingham Palace and you should see the trooping of the colour and the RAF fly past. But on top of that, we have two amazing launches. Hull, which I must admit I've never been to, and Trafford, which I've looked at it on the map. That's a great area, isn't it, where your development is? Right in Manchester, near the cricket ground. So yeah, look forward to it. So thank you everybody for jumping on. Will, is it you or Jeremy to go first?
Me first, Chris. Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody joining. So if we can have the first slide, please, Chris. Very good, thank you. So I think most people on this call know who we are, but very quickly, IP Global. I look after the sales. Jeremy's obviously based in Abu Dhabi, looking after Qatar as well. We've been with the business for a number of years. Founded in 2006. We've invested in, gosh, now that's slightly out of date. So we're well over 100 projects in the UK now, 22 in Germany, 17 in Australia, and 19 projects in the US. So we've been around different markets, all good, safe locations to be buying property for investment. We've got a very interesting model that we use to source the product, which I'll come on to. Part of our offering and one of the strongest sort of unique things about what we do is that we also manage and rent out all the apartments that we bring to market. So Complete is our sister company owned by IP Global. We've got over 3,000 apartments under management, a big chunk obviously in London, which has been a big market for us over the years, a lot of properties in Birmingham and Manchester and the other regional cities, and quite a bit now, as I've mentioned, in Germany. So it's a long-term relationship that we build with clients. In terms of how we source the product, we're an underwriting business. So this means that we commit to buying what we bring to market, basically. So we'll come on to Manchester being an example, but good to just use it. But let's just say there's a developer building a product in a country and in a city that we feel has got good growth potential. Then we'll carry out a significant amount of research into the scheme, into the development, into the pricing, and then we'll actually ourselves commit to buying the units that we bring to market. So we're very much co-invested with our clients. And
I've got to say, Will, that is just a unique thing that IPG have. Nobody has imitated that. And just to reinforce, and I hate the expression, but IPG have skin in the game. By the way, you can see in the background the Coldstream Garden coming out. Thank you, Will.
It is there, Chris. Yeah, you're dead right. Skin in the game is a good word. But the other thing is, we wouldn't be able to get the projects that we get if we weren't committing to buying them, basically. So it really gives us access to interesting things and different things. And we're able to be quite nimble. We're able to move and select different cities and different countries when we feel the time is right. So we're not like a sort of developer that's tied to building out the sites that they bought years and years ago that they've been bringing through planning. So we don't like to take on too much, but we do like to go out there and find the best projects and bring them. So
interesting, Will, and just to go on, you actually have in the past had Kuala Lumpur, you've had Australia, 3 different cities, United States of America, obviously Portugal, Germany. I mean, you have over the years been around the world.
Absolutely, yeah. And you learn a lot as you go, right, Chris? So that's what we do, and that's who we are. We actually originally connected with Holborn back in the day when we were doing mortgages, when we needed some mortgages, and your mortgage team was helping us with our clients. So that was sort of where we originally connected. In terms of sort of what we do, and we're always looking for this. This is probably our sort of recipe book, if you like. So we're looking to get into markets where there isn't enough supply to meet demand, where there's growing population, where there's strong economic growth, and often where there's kind of a lot of regeneration going on. A lot of those top sort of 4 things are ticked perhaps in the Middle East, apart from the supply and demand. It's so easy for this market to be pumped with supply, whereas the cities that we're getting into, there's much less developable land. So they just can't meet the demand as these economies and the population goes up. And ultimately, in my view, property goes up for one reason. It's because there's more people coming to the location, and those more people are earning more money. And that's sort of what you need for property value growth. Next slide, please. Right, so just speaking a little bit about Manchester. We first invested in Manchester, what was it, Jeremy? 2015, I think it was.
Yeah, in Chinatown, the heart of the city, yeah.
Yeah, and then we did 2 or 3 schemes sort of very centrally, and our clients have done really well. We've seen some really good, strong growth kind of inside the ring road, the city centre of Manchester. And this is a great graph to show you kind of why we got in, because you've got household disposable income from the year 2000. You can see how that's climbed to where it is now in 2020. It's not far off doubled. And then you've got unemployment is the wiggly line. And you can see that, staggering really, look, in 2010, it was peaking at over 14%. So this was coming down, and this was a good time to be getting into Manchester, because you've got, when you've got high unemployment, you're not going to have a lot of property value growth. So whenever we're getting into a market, we're always looking for more money being earned by the residents, and we're looking for unemployment to come down. And that's what we've got in Manchester at the moment. And it's somewhere around about 6% at the moment. It did obviously go up a little bit during the pandemic. The bottom graph is another interesting piece of data from Oxford Economics. And this shows you what people are earning in the different income brackets. So on the far left, you can see 117,000 people earning the lower income bracket between up to 35,000 euro. And then you've got 58,000 people earning the middle bracket, so between 35 and 100, and very few earning over 100,000 euro. So that was in 2010. So fast forward to last year, you've got a lot less in the lower bracket, and you can see how many people have filtered through into the middle income bracket. And then there's another 10,000 odd residents that are in the higher bracket. And then fast forward to what Oxford Economics predict in another 14 years, you can see that how that middle bracket is going down. The lower bracket is going down, the middle bracket is growing a lot. And they're predicting, gosh, another sort of 35, 40,000 people coming into the upper bracket. So why is this happening? We'll have
I think the context of this, isn't it, that with the property prices having done so well for the last little while, kind of, it might beg the question about affordability. But this is just going to show that the staggering number of people in the households who are going to be earning over 100,000. It means that actually the affordability ratios are getting better in Manchester over that time, even though the prices have been going up.
Absolutely, yeah. So what's driving this really is a good question. So if we just flick to the next slide, there's a lot of financial services industry. There's a big financial services industry now in Manchester. So you've got over 280,000 people employed in either the banking, financial services, or accountancy kind of roles. Big companies like HSBC, Barclays, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, they've all moved a major presence of their operations into Manchester. Why have they done that? Because it's much cheaper for them to operate a business up in Manchester than probably where they were previously, which was sort of obviously in central London. So there's this word north shoring that a lot of people use, and that is companies looking to reduce their costs. And it was difficult before because Manchester's always wanted to attract these kind of companies to the city, but the city just wasn't a very well developed and that nice a place to live. So now that they've done a huge amount of regeneration in central Manchester, it's easier for these companies to go up there, operate at lower cost, and attract their staff to follow them. So that's really been one of the big drivers. There's a big digital hub and media. So UK Media City is the biggest media hub in the whole of the UK. The BBC moved their headquarters up there in 2011. ITV followed shortly, 2013. And those two sort of major TV companies and all the connected businesses to them employ around about 25,000 people in that sector. Our new development is literally just across a couple of streets across from Media City. So big media presence. And this is a sector that's growing, and Media City is actually expected to more than double in the next sort of 20 years. And still there's a lot of manufacturing. I mean, obviously the city had a big industrial presence in industrial times, but there is still a lot of manufacturing going on in and around the city as well. So looks very different to what it did 20 years ago. Next slide, please. In terms of sort of growth predictions, we've talked about incomes, we've talked about all the employment that's going on in the city, and this is predictions from JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, who are a big global property company, and this is their house price growth predictions for the next 5 years. And their rental growth as well. So good predictions in terms of sort of what they think house prices are going to do. And we would very much agree that this is achievable. And this is kind of what we've been seeing over the last 4 or 5 years and is sustainable. Next slide, please. Thank you, Chris. So talked about regeneration. There's just some big schemes here. A lot of you probably know, but Circle Square is a massive development of mixed use development, £750 million being invested into this area of the city to create a lot of workspace and a lot of homes. Another big project, which is called Noma on the far right-hand side, is in the northern part of the city. Again, it's £800 million being invested by 2025. It's going to bring a huge amount of commercial space, a lot of residents, a lot of investment really, and a lot of jobs as these various developments are built and completed. So there's plenty going on, and I think if any of you been to Manchester in the last 3 or 4 years, you'd probably be astounded by sort of how many skyscrapers are coming out the ground and how many smart buildings have been developed over the last sort of 5 or 10 years.
I think context is important here, because like a lot of these just look like, yeah, okay, that's a development, but it's the scale of it here when we're talking about the amount of, well, billions here, but individual projects and master plans costing 750, 800 million. This is London numbers, really, and actually I think we kind of forget. So actually some of these northern cities in the UK, they really were quite poor before the turn of the millennium, and so the turnaround has been led by Manchester, and Manchester's got itself to this kind of area of safety, really, in terms of its growth and its spend. That we're getting big developers, medium-sized developers. It's a big booming economy with that fast-growing population, and so the scale of investment is ramping up because generally everyone considers it safe to have, for employment, for their businesses and so forth. And so that's why, if we're comparing it to most other cities, having this amount of billions being spent in the city is, that should spell safety for you for a property market for the ongoing years.
Absolutely. Big student city as well. You've got a lot of young people educated in the city, and previously they would have left because the salaries and weren't on offer, but now they're on offer. It's retaining a lot of its young population, and it's the capital of the north. The government are driving wealth, driving jobs north. That's every government's sort of remit and promise to voters, is to bring a little bit more wealth to the north. And Boris Johnson's always banging on about this sort of levelling up campaign, and it's really going now. It's really moving. Right. So in terms of sort of where we are, Jeremy, I don't know if have you got the cursor, or have I think you've got it, haven't you? But you've obviously got city centre, Spinningfields and Deansgate. This is kind of the banking hub where Jeremy is now. And the city centre is quite small. You can probably walk across Manchester in about 20 minutes, actually 25 minutes. So it's not a huge city centre. Now, our development is the bottom left. I've circled it there, just opposite the Old Trafford cricket ground, where England play a lot of their cricket matches. There's also a very famous university that's up and coming called University 92, which was founded by Gary Neville, I think David Beckham, Paul Scholes, the class of 92 from the Man United football team. That's right. Their campus is right across from our building. You've got Man United's football stadium about 600-700 meters north. Jeremy can just hover his cursor over. There you go. And then Media City is on the other side of the river. So you've got Media City, that whole sort of area there where there's various quays. That is where you've got that BBC, you've got ITV, and you've got about 25,000 people employed. Just left of there, Jeremy, is the Trafford Business Park. Exactly. So again, this is around about 25,000 people working in this industrial business park there as well. So you've got a 3
That's
kilometer...
the biggest industrial park in Europe. That one.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So you've got about 3 kilometers up to city centre, and there's a tram, the Manchester Metro line, to get you up into town, and then you've got obviously a huge amount of employment locally. So a really good location. We favour these kind of areas. We feel that central Manchester is extremely expensive now. Having sourced developments back in 2015 at, around about about these prices really, £350 a square foot, about what we're selling this latest scheme at. It's very difficult to bring ourselves to go and buy it now £500 and £550 a square foot, which is where a lot of smart developments in central Manchester are coming to market, which we just see, we just don't see where the value is there and where the growth is going to be. So we're very much focused on the periphery of the city. We've done quite a bit in Stockport, which is just a little bit further south, a little bit in Eccles as well. Next slide, please. There's just another map there, but I think I've probably explained most things really on there already. I've done a thorough job, so we'll skip on.
Yeah, exactly. I think if anything, what that shows is actually it's not an area which is on the outskirts of development. This whole stretch basically coming out that arterial road and going down to Media City, there's a lot of residential buildings, and there's a lot of jobs and a lot of kind of amenities there. So it's a lived-in space. You're not on the outskirts.
Yeah. Maybe
you've got a success story as well in the area that you're looking at, because you launched Trafford 1, didn't you? And what, that 3 years ago.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
just
Yeah, it's not the
in
first time
very
we've
near
been
there.
Yeah, great scheme. There's a 2-year build, and prices are nicely up from where we bought, and it's rented. I mean, we rented the whole of that development in about 3.5 months. We had about 100 units, and that completed. When did that complete? End of 2020, Jez, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah,
There's about
Late
170 or so in that block, but yeah, I mean, it was ridiculously popular.
Yeah, we had a lot of demand, which is great. So here's the scheme. This is our development. It's an existing office building that's been repurposed to residential. 116 apartments. There's a range. There's 20 studios. You can see the pricing there, including parking. Every unit in those price parameters has a parking space. There's a few studios that don't, but every unit there from 135 above does have parking. The 1-bed start at 170 with parking, and the 2 beds at 244.
Can I just jump in there, because it's a question that we're going to get asked, and by the way, you can see the Coldstream guards just behind me. The studios, and we talk about mortgages all the time. Your guys and I guess Donna and Darren, they've looked at the studios. Are they mortgageable? Is that a good question? Can I ask that now?
It's a very good question. Are they mortgageable for a non-resident? Yes, some of them are, Chris. They need to be over about 350 square feet. So we wouldn't recommend buying anything smaller than that, because a lot of expat lenders don't want to lend on small units. They have a criteria on that, really. But UK residents, investors, it's much easier to get mortgages on smaller units. So yeah, that's certainly an important consideration that we must take into account.
So basically, ask first and just get the square footage right.
Absolutely. There's a new piece of legislation coming about ground rents. From the 1st of June, from today, right? You can't sell a new build development with a ground rent. So there's no ground rent included in this lease. The payment plan is our usual payment plan. It's 20% down on exchange, which takes about 3 or 4 weeks from reservation, and then 80% on completion. The lower floors are completing in July next year. The higher floors, September.
And reservation fee?
2,500 to reserve,
Okay.
which is refunded.
That's excellent. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
So that holds the property, takes it off the market. It's your client's property, and then 6 weeks for exchange on average.
Yeah, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. You know, you've got a few legal things to sort out. We've got contracts to get out. We've got AML, they call it, anti-money laundering checks to do. But once everything's done, then the 20% is paid across, and then the balance on completion. So
And if you're taking a mortgage, we usually talk about 65, maybe 70%. But as I say every week, please, if you want to get dipped, then speak to our mortgage company, and that's a decision in principle. Sorry about the jargon. Get a decision in principle if you're in any doubt. But yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Will, carry on.
No, great, Chris. Thank you. I mean, you used to do mortgages, so you know about mortgages. But yeah, obviously important to know your nationality and where you're resident as well. And we Holborn mortgage team can help you with that. Great. Okay. Just some more images here in terms of sort of the finish of the units. Notable things would be the nice and bright. The windows open, and they're sort of quite tall, high windows. So there's plenty of light coming into the apartments, and they've got some nice views. I think you can even see the cricket ground from a number of the apartments. So I think we've just got another couple of CGIs on the next page there. So you can just see in terms of the quality of the finish. The spec will all be in the contract. We've got a lot more information, obviously, about the scheme. We've got cash flows. We've got floor plans. If you're interested, then of course come and talk to us. We actually haven't launched this yet. We're launching on Monday next week. So we've literally.
Yes, I realised that I sort of pushed you into a corner and said, "Can we launch? Can we launch?" And so, yeah, thanks for doing this. We're ahead of the market.
Absolutely.
I
think handing over to Jeremy now.
There's certainly a lot of interest in the Manchester one. We can feel it with partners and existing clients and so forth who kind of want the information early. So I think we'll see a busy couple of weeks on this one.
Jeremy, I think you've got a good point. Could I just mention one thing? I mean, what we've seen in the last sort of 4 or 5 months is really these kind of cities are back to life now. You know, before when a lot of companies were working from home and there were a lot of COVID restrictions, we didn't have, I wouldn't say we had a lot of empty apartments, but the city didn't feel like it does now. You know, I went back to the UK recently, it was absolutely heaving everywhere I went. So we manage well over 650 apartments in Manchester. And as we speak of today, there are 2 empty units, and they've literally just come empty, and they've already been a deposit paid, and they've been agreed to be relet. So there's a lot of demand now for city centre living again. So I think really that's kind of back, right? And I think we know there's been a lot of house price growth in the UK during COVID, because we've had sort of stamp duty holidays. A lot of people have been thinking, right, I'm going to live further away from work. But those kind of houses and periphery areas of London and these cities have grown a lot, but city centres have been sort of standing still a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years. Whereas now I think we're set for a period of time where these cities are coming back to life. But I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a good time to be a landlord. Rents keep rising, and there's just not the property for the people who are coming to the cities. So Hull, I'm quite conscious that probably a lot of people on this call may not have been across the Hull, or maybe have been presented properties from Hull before. This is our first. I think we're a company certainly who tend to kind of pioneer and come into markets early, and that's it's everything we do for our investment team is all about finding value, and essentially what we're looking at here is one of the northern post-industrial cities on the turn, still being able to get absolutely prime central properties for under £300 a square foot, and we're looking at double that in central Manchester now. And what we're going to look at for the next few slides is just how safe that is in comparison, really, and what kind of industries there, what kind of GDP growth and economic growth is going to be happening. And so, and actually particularly, we're quite proud of the investment team for finding properties so well located. It's about as central as we've had in any of the projects I remember for the last 3 or 4 years. This is bang in the centre of the city. So as a macro view, you can see from the map here, up the north, it's traditionally and historically a port city. That's where all its wealth came from historically. It's currently got about 260,000 inhabitants. But like a lot of the northern cities, one's based on manufacturing and trade and so forth. Come to the 70s and 80s, there was a kind of economic slump, and really it's only around the turn of the millennium that we saw money flooding back into the Midlands and the north. And so the big government-led projects for city deals started with Birmingham and Manchester to kind of give them more autonomy, give them more cash and money. And then come 2010 is when there was a second wave, and so Hull was one of those to start getting plans in place. Now, it's been the city of culture of the UK in that time. It's been given status as a free port city quite recently, which is a big thing for future. Essentially, that means that for what is already a port which brings in 18% of all UK imports and effectively feeds the north, for materials, for consumables. Giving a free port status means that there's going to be a lot of tax advantages for companies to set up business there, to run their imports from there, and that's a really big driver. A port in itself can really be the bedrock of the future of a city. I mean, like Dubai, it was all based off a port originally, and so that's not to be underestimated. Just the knock-on effect of having that kind of incentive for companies to be coming into market. Now, here's the property we have. I'll show you on a map a bit later on in terms of just the location and where it is, but I think we can all agree it's a very nice looking property. This is in a cloister, it's an old maltings, so everything's kind of quite old properties which have been refurbed to high standards. Almost everything around here is been refurbed already. So within these kind of 5-6 central streets of all the old properties around there, this is going to be the stuff which is the most desirable for renters. We're literally, 3 or 4 minutes walk from the high street in the town centre, from the municipal gardens, and access to everything here. But importantly also, everything in this property is going to be able to have car parking access, really. So you won't have to buy it either. So you have the tenants who will be renting your property will have permissions and granted access for car parking in there. So you get the benefit with your flat of having parking, but you don't have to spend £15,000 on it, which is a nice little booster. So this is the other side of the building we can see. So it's a refurb. We're going to be completing for April next year, 31 apartments, so not too many, quite easily assimilated into market. But as I said, under £300 a square foot, about 290, 295 a square foot. So we've got one beds from 153 to 164, and two beds from 193 to 227. And this really will be some of the nicest finished, high-end property in the city centre. It's a market which developers are just getting their teeth into and realising, they can make profit out of here, and they can still build at affordable rates here. You can see the service charge is very low compared to most projects we'll have on market, and there's a good long leasehold of 250 years. And unlike most of our projects, actually, which will always be 20% deposit, this one is actually on the cheaper side, so it's only 15% deposit now, and then the rest come April for next year. So actually not a huge outlay in terms of cash deposit for now.
The question I get asked, Jeremy, is if you just go back one slide, is where are they on? I know it's a refurb, it's not a build. Where are they up to? It's April next year. It's not long to go. So what does it look like now? And I know you haven't got any graphics for it, but perhaps you give us an idea, because it's a hot topic at the moment, Holborn.
Yeah, well, I mean, we kind of have a bit of a active. We're looking at that. Refurbs make a lot of sense to us at the moment in terms of value for us and our clients. Like steel has gone up a lot in the last 2 years, and that has a direct knock-on effect for prices and so forth. So actually having refurb buildings which eliminate some of that actually allow us to, chop 5-7% off prices they would be if it's a brand new build sometimes. So this is a existing structure. It doesn't need kind of fundamental work to it. It's to say one side of it is a kind of building which was probably offices, which was built in probably around the 70s, and the building to the right was part of the Maltings, which is slightly older than that, which has a refurb probably about 20 years ago. But again, this is going to be changing the shape of it from what was offices to a full kind of residential fit out. So because it's a refurb, we don't have to be worrying about the piling. We don't have to be worrying about that. So it's actually a relatively simple job for this developer, Continental, who are basically an expert in refurbs. They've done refurbs all across the country for properties like this, and they can get their teams in and out. And so April is actually a very realistic time frame for it, and there's a lot less of those potential hurdles with a full construction, which can get in the way and cause delays. So we can.
I think the 15% is also quite appetizing. 15% now, and then the rest on completion, with hopefully say a 65-70% mortgage, as I said. Another question that's come in at the bottom, when it comes to who are going to be the renters, is that a fair question? Have you got an idea of who the target market may be when it comes to renting them out?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got a couple of slides about the economy here, and so I think come probably 1990s and so forth, there was this is when the city was kind of in its lowest ebb effectively, and it had lost its manufacturing and lost a lot of the work coming in from the port, but actually it's been reinventing itself, and actually it's what's branded as the UK's energy city now. So what we see here on this first page is some of the non-energy companies, and we want to see a bit of the size of them. So we've got in healthcare, we've got Reckitt in Divior, and we've got some technology. They do a lot of cabling across the country for 5G, manufacturing, and food and beverage. These are big companies, big employers who have their headquarters in Hull. So we could either have some kind of people who work for these companies, or this is probably one of the most eye-catching industries for Hull itself. It's green energy and sustainable energy companies, which are really building a cluster up there in the Humber region, and particularly in Hull. So we actually had Boris Johnson hosting the Saudis about a month and a half ago over there, talking about it was some 200 million, I think, investment up to the northeast here. So but what we already have is Siemens with Gamesa. They have just on the in the dockside there in the Freeport tax haven, they have the UK's largest wind farm manufacturing. So they make all the blades and they make the main machinery for that. And that's something which the government obviously is committed to its carbon neutral status by 2030, I think it is. And wind farms is going to be an enormous part of that, and we're talking multi millions coming into this town just directly because of that. And a lot of the other energy companies are kind of piggyback on this. They're going to be basing themselves in the free ports as well, and it's just the industry of the futures, basically. So, and those kind of guys will be the employees, the technicians, the engineers, and so forth, who'll be living in, smack in the centre of town, who can walk down to the ports in 10-15 minutes and and spend their weekends down at the marinas down there. It's a nice livable space.
I think what I like to think of is that IPG, who are usually ahead of the wave, and when things are happening, for example, just going back quite a long way, with Crossrail, now the Elizabeth line only opened last week. You were sort of groundbreakers on getting in there earlier, and maybe Hull is going to be the same, because it's not one that jumps out straight away. But I had no idea that all that was going on the energy saving. Brilliant. That's where the employees, that's where the rent is going to come from. So,
well,
and with a price point like that, it's good.
We look for value, and we look for prices which have capacity to grow. They're not going to grow unless there's driving forces behind it. So, we know that there's more people than there are available properties there. Developers have only just started to kind of build nice new properties, but the population has been rising. But we've had our eye on Hull for probably a couple of years now, and similar to, say, markets like periphery of Manchester, like Stockport, these areas which aren't necessarily being talked about, but actually make a lot of sense financially. And with the extra commitments that have been coming in over the last year in terms of hundreds of millions of pounds of spend and regeneration, we just know the market is going to be growing to a certain capacity. Obviously, we can't tell exactly how much, but it becomes safe then to invest in something under £300 a square foot in the centre of the city. So that's what we spent.
From the wealth manager on, the clients that are on, talking about somebody with £50,000 in the bank account who want to make an investment, they can actually jump into this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something which is, for its location, it's going to rent every day of the week, and it's just going to be something safe to hold on to for 10 years, and hopefully we should see a lot of capital growth there. But here we can see numbers, just how well the economy has been doing since 2000, has been growing steadily, and particularly since around about 2010 when it picked up, and it's projected to do 58% GDP growth over the next decade or so. So unemployment actually only sits at 4.6%, which is actually below the national average, and its average wages there's a lot less disparity between some of the bigger cities. So people tend to have a decent kind of affordability when they're living there. If we go then to transportation, which is obviously important, Hull's actually well connected already, but it is part of the strategic transport plan for the Northern Powerhouse rail, so it'll be connected up. Obviously coming from this port, they want those goods to be able to be shipped to Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, etc. quite quickly and easily. That's all connected well. And then regeneration, similar to we had to Manchester, we just look at the scale here. And so we've already had maybe about 100 million spent on public amenities and public space, what with the City of Culture there, they had in 2017. But now actually what we're seeing here is certain points around the city centre having large-scale regeneration money being spent on them. The ports is kind of building on the tourism side as well. And then we've got some, the university's already had 300 million spent, and that's already completed. And, we can see from the city centre just where the money's being spent. So it's an expansive city, but actually a lot of the money and focus is around the port and the old city centre.
Yeah, Jeremy, just to add, I mean, our development is literally about 100 metres from Queen's Park, which is a massive park that's being completely redeveloped in the centre of town. It was one of those images. So that's a nice focal point for people to better enjoy in the coming years.
It reminds me a bit of years ago when I was, university times, travelling up to Leeds, expecting it to be a bit grim and a bit northern, but actually being very pretty in the centre. Like Hull is really pretty. Its whole city centre, that kind of probably mile block radius, is old Victoriana. It was a very wealthy city. Given the city status, probably 1880s or so, but it was very rich at that time. So actually, you can see that, and you can see all the the extra regeneration money coming back in, giving life to what was a very wealthy area. And here, obviously, we just wanted to kind of give a good idea of supply and demand, and just how bad the supply has been for this growing population. It's only 13% of the housing fulfilled over the past 8 years. And so as much as that's bad for the locals, that's music to our ears as investors, because that means that anything that's coming onto market in property is going to be snapped up. There's a lot of competition for it. So we'll see rents and house prices going up as people particularly want to buy and live into the right in the city centre.
I've got I've got a question coming at the bottom. You make a very good investment case, both of you, for Manchester and for Hull. Okay, if asked, which one would either of you go for? Questions just come in.
Oh, I'll answer that. Depends where you've. I think it depends where you've got a property. Actually, I've got a little property that I bought from IP in 2016 in Manchester, so I'd probably diversify and buy in Hull at the moment. Actually, Jeremy, just go back. Do you mind? That's an interesting, the affordability ratio. So I don't know if you guys have seen this, but that is how many multiples of the average salary in Hull, Manchester, Birmingham, Sheffield, and London are compared there. Do you need to purchase the average property price? So that's just a very much a sort of room for growth indication. And you can see where London's got to now, which is why we don't really focus on the city much, because it's so unaffordable for many. And you can see how Hull is just even cheaper than Manchester in terms of that calculation. So it's an interesting stat, that a lot of room for growth,
which rather implies the room for the 5-10 year marker. So this is what we try and do effectively, is to kind of come into market early, and in 5 or 10 years then the affordability level is going to be up near 6, and so that's what we did in Manchester 7-8 years ago, and that's what we did in Liverpool and all these places which have kind of gone through some movement. And this is why Hull makes sense now for the kind of property we can get there at the moment. Obviously, we would expect the properties to look nice, be finished to a very high standard. We are very much looking to attract that middle management, 25 to 40-year-old, worker who's going to be living in the centre. Our team do all the checks. They do all the credit scores and so forth, and they aim to fill the building effectively with that kind of tenant profile. And if everyone's roughly that kind of tenant profile, it actually lets people, encourage people to stay longer because they like the community more. And if you went onto Google Street View and just looked around this, what do you call it, cloister or square, a lot of the other buildings around it, you can tell they're very nice residential. The Maltings one, which have already been refurbed there, so it's that kind of area, and it will be of note in the city centre. I put this in just actually to try and show just how clearly, if I get my so here's our property here. So we are literally 2 streets back from this old grand Victorian big park, which is going through 20 million facelift now. And all this area here, this is essentially city centre. This is the high street, the town centre, with lovely old Victorian, and going back before that, Georgian buildings, leading to the left there where the central train station is. And if we move south from here down to the bottom, you probably look about 3-4 streets away from the ports and where the marina is and where the big shopping centres are as well. But in terms of the nice city centre, this is where we are. So you really couldn't be more centrally located than this. And so it's got all its amenities. The high street's actually, it's not one of these kind of cities where it's all Poundlands and betting shops and so forth. It's actually got nice brands on the high street already, so it's a nice place to live. And much the same, I won't loiter on this one, but this is something you can look at. Particularly what I like to see is on the right hand side, they're all the major employers. So you've got your Siemens, your KCOM. That's where all the people who are going to be living here, where they can travel to, basically. So there's the local transport network, but equally a lot of tenants here will be having a car and car parking space with the flat here. So it's all quite closely accessible for them. And actually, particularly this property, it's right in the heart of the theatre district as well. Hull's got quite a old arts and theatre kind of background, and so there's a number of there's a kind of a college for the arts, and then there's a few theatres probably just within short walking distance. And that's it for Hull for the investment case. I hope that kind of goes to show how strong and probably surprising Hull is in terms of its value and what's going on there. I think it's a bit of a no-brainer in terms of a buy and hold for 10 years. But we just wanted to add in here at the end, you know, what we've got coming up, what our investment team are kind of in legals and talks with at the moment, and what we can probably expect to see from us in the next quarter, next 3 or 4 months.
That's great. I'll tell you what I was going to ask, somebody's asked it down below. You are famous for looking outside of the UK, and in particular lately, of course, Berlin has been fantastic. I think you've done 20 different developments in Berlin.
Yeah,
and Portugal as well. You've got
Leipzig
Leipzig there. Berlin, is that out of favour? Is that dropped out?
It's not out of favour. It's just the same way that when we kind of migrated from London, you know, when something becomes, it's very popular, and we're getting a lot of institutional money buying into Eastern Germany generally. So, you know, they're buying into Berlin and the outskirts of Berlin and Leipzig. But that does mean that, you know, prices have shot up from when we were first buying there, maybe 6-7 years ago. Some of our clients have doubled prices in that time. You know, the capital growth has been extraordinary, but we can't keep relying on that in the same area for the same reason. So we are looking at that, but developers have clearly got their tails up, and they're not, you know, offering anything cheaply for us to buy. So we will when we find the right projects, but it's likely now to be in the surrounding boroughs or, you know, cities and towns around it. So there's Potsdam, there's Brandenburg, there's areas which within a half an hour commute to Berlin. That's going to be the stuff which is kind of a better value. But, you know, we have to find it. It's there's not that much being built, hence why we're haven't had anything in the last probably 8 months for Berlin, which we've launched. But Leipzig is half the price per square foot, and you know, equally got a very strong investment case for the kind of industry and tech, and, you know, life sciences is growing in there. So actually that, and potentially then Dortmund, which is in Western Germany, which we haven't done before, that's something that's on our radar, which we're looking at the moment.
Portugal, that's been very popular. I know you've been very successful. I believe that it wasn't so easy when it came to mortgages. Am I right?
I think no, we haven't had a major issue with that. It's been challenging, the process, but with the Golden Visa program changing, Chris, right, and with Porto and Lisbon being removed from the program, I think we're probably in a sort of watch and wait kind of situation now. We're just going to let that settle down and see, because there was a lot of money going into those cities, which was international money for the Golden Visa. So I think for now, you probably won't see us do too much in Portugal. We're very happy with what we've sourced and what we've got rented and delivered for clients so far, but we're just watching the market for the next year or so, I'd say.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That's really incisive. Well, Hull, Manchester, everybody out there, this has been recorded and will be on our podcast, along with other valuable, interesting, amusing shows. I hope you enjoy over the background seeing what's going over on in London. It's not quite the... I did say I'll be live, and not quite live, but it's just as good. We've done 2 things in one go. You've seen what's going on in London, and also listened to Jeremy and William. Thanks, guys. Brilliant. Anybody wants to get in touch, come through me, go straight to William or Jeremy, your wealth manager. As Will said much earlier on, all the information, floor plans, you know, cash flows, everything you need, they've got. And also, if you want an individual chat with them, then please shout out. Meanwhile, there we are. The royal family is just going into Buckingham Palace. So, guys, thank you very much. Catch up with you soon. We'll go cycling. Thank you, and thank you, Miltos.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.